Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. HTM here with another update from the PTS server. Today we're checking out the week 3 PTS patch notes with a fair amount of changes, I would say. Some positive changes, but some things still left in the air. This is not everything that we wanted, but I think we still will see more changes probably next week and the following week. So keep that in mind. There is more work to be done, but we can at least look at what's coming up this week and what still needs to be done. So most changes are here in the combat and abilities when we're looking at update 35. First thing is they did actually listen to some of our feedback as far as damage over time and healing over time abilities. They reversed some of the initial changes, or at least made it make more sense, I think, in the overall theme of things in the game. So basic damage over time effects that stick to a target. So those sticky single target dots, for example, those are going to remain at the new standard, which is 20 seconds duration and 2-second tick frequency. Coefficient here is 0.105, so this is the lowest damage per tick, but these are also obviously the longest duration. These are going to be skills like Degeneration from the Mage's Guild or Poison Injection from the Bow skill line, things like that. So they did keep those longer in duration, and this is going to be, I think, especially useful for players who want more of a simplified rotation. You're still going to have some 20-second dot skills that you can take advantage of. Now, the other category is going to be damage over time skills that are in a static area. So basically area of effect, or sometimes these are called like ground-based AoE dots, whatever you want to call it. These are moving back to more of the faster duration, higher damage dot ticks. So these are going to be moved back to 10 seconds, 12 seconds, or 15 seconds, depending on the skill line. And these, again, will tick every 1 second, so they're going to do damage every second. Also important to keep in mind here, they did reduce the cost of these compared to what's on live server, and the damage is slightly reduced, though not nearly as bad as what we saw in week 1. So if you're testing out your build, you will see some increased damage, at least in this week 3 version of the PTS, mainly due to this change. The 1 second dot ticks, and they are doing more damage per tick. Now we'll get into some of the individual skill changes further on here, but also check out this one, healing over time abilities from static areas. So again, those ground-based or those AoE heal over time skills are going to get a similar adjustment, ticking once every 1 second instead of the slower 2-second ticks on those heals. Though the coefficient per second, meaning basically the strength of the heal, is going to remain at the lower PTS week 1 standard. So this will be something to check out if you're a healer, if you're in more organized like raid group content. One of the biggest concerns was the 2-second ticks from heal over time effects were much too slow because enemy damage did not get adjusted at all, right? There's still tons of damage in things like veteran trials, specifically the hard modes, that could not be countered quick enough with the 2-second ticks. So now that they're moving those back to every 1 second, I'd imagine should be a little bit more comfortable. But again, if you do have access to PTS, make sure you hop on and provide your feedback. Next up, let's get into some class changes. And like I said, they actually mentioned in a note on Friday that they were going to look more at class balance, specifically Sorcerers and Warden. Now, some of those changes did go into effect this week, but I have to imagine that more is coming next week because this list seems almost incomplete, or it's not, it's not where it needs to be quite yet. So let's go ahead and go over these. And as always, let me know what you think down in the comments section. So for the Dragon Knight class, just an adjustment here to Ash Cloud, returned the duration and tick rate of this ability back to 15 seconds and 1 second, rather than 20 seconds and 2 seconds for each damage tick. So I think you're going to see this across the board for a lot of the class-based AoE dots. 15 seconds is kind of the longer standard duration, and then we will see some 10-second dots returning as well. So for example, going on to the Necromancer next and Boneyard, they return the duration of this ability to 10 seconds for the duration and 1 second for the damage tick. So that would be an example of one of those shorter duration AoE dots returning on the Necromancer. You can see that they also reduced the cost on this one, and they also reduced the bonus damage when consuming a corpse to 30% down from 50%. So that's interesting as well. Even though you might get more damage compared to week 1, still not going to be close to what you get on live, and they have even more nerfs here in terms of like passives. Living Death, I know this was a big one. The Spirit Mender and specifically Spirit Guardian. There was apparently an issue where there was a missing 0. Yes, that's really what it was. A missing 0 on the pet's total health. And it's now 30,000 health rather than 3,000. This means that you can take up to 300,000 damage over its duration before the pet dies. So apparently that was a bug in PTS week 1. It wasn't supposed to die that quickly. So now here is the actual number. Should be more effective now. Let's move on to Nightblades next. And Path of Darkness, they return this, as you'd expect, to 10-second duration rather than 20 seconds. They also reduced the cost of Twisting Path. Now, Veiled Strike and its morphs got a significant change as well. This is the main spammable DPS skill for the Nightblade. Either the Magical Morph or the Stamina Morph is going to get this change. This skill no longer stuns enemies when used from their flank. Let's go ahead and read the developer comment. We previously enabled this ability to crowd control targets as other forms of CC in the Nightblade kit were lackluster. And after the patch and this update, this issue has been amended, and we're comfortable that the class will still be just as efficient from the shadows without Veiled Strike's stun, allowing the new morph biases to be the main selling points of the spammable. Okay, so in case you missed the week 1 patch notes, you're not sure what they talked about, they added some new bonuses to each morph of this skill. For surprise attack, this is always going to be a critical strike when flanking a target, and for concealed weapon, you get minor expedition at all times, and you get bonus 300 weapon and spell damage after leaving sneak or invisibility. So those two effects really do, they add a lot to the skill and its morphs, so I get what they're talking about. I personally did like the stun on this a lot, especially for PvP. It was nice to have on my Nightblade, but I can definitely see where it might be a little bit overloaded presently. Now let's move on to Shadow Cloak and Dark Cloak. This morph heals now for 11 to 14% of your missing health, down from 20%. The developer comment says that keep in mind that while this number may seem high, as the ability and other sources heal you, it naturally diminishes in power, making it much better to use when you are below 50% health. So they want this basically to be an emergency heal, not just a standard heal. Now let's move on to Sorcerer. They did promise some big changes to Sorcerer after a ton of nerfs, honestly, in week 1. So let's see what's here. Dark Magic and Crystal Weapon. This morph now splits its damage into 2 separate hits. The first hit deals damage equal to a range spammable, while the second hit deals damage equal to 30% of that. Okay, kind of an interesting change. So the overall damage will be the same as PTS week 1, but less punitive if you only get 1 charge of the ability off. So it's front-loading the damage a little bit more, less damage on the second hit. So I don't know, the damage is still a little bit low considering it does cost more than a traditional spammable. It's doing 130% damage. I think most players would like to see that increase just a little bit more, but this may be a step in the right direction. And then Bound Armor and Bound Armaments, the Stamina Sorcerer skill, they increase the damage of this ability by approximately 44% per hit. Now, this is interesting. They nerfed this skill. I'm looking at week 1 patch notes right here on my other monitor. Week 1, this was nerfed by 38%. So it did 38% less damage week 1. And now they increased the damage of this ability by approximately 44%. So what is going on with this skill? I'm not sure even the developers know at this point. They did also remove the light attack bonus. I'm assuming it still gives you stamina, but we'll have to test this out more on PTS and see what those damage numbers look like, because they are just all over the place for that skill. Now, Lightning Splash, your class AoE did get changed as we'd expect. It's now going to last 10 seconds with 1 second dot ticks. And Liquid Lightning, which is the longer duration morph, is now going to be an extra 5 seconds. So 15 seconds total on that one, instead of like 30 seconds, which is what it was on PTS week 1, which is kind of crazy. So I do like this. I think it's going to fit better in rotations. If you're a newer player, if you're still struggling to get your rotation down, I think this will be a nice option. 15 seconds should last just enough to sort of get your rotation down, plus it's going to fit better with buffs like Critical Surge, which are usually like 30 seconds. So that is good. And they did fix a bug on Overload where you could not light or heavy attack if the ultimate was toggled and you casted another ultimate. So that's good, they fixed that. Moving on to Templar, not a lot changed here, actually. They reduced the duration for shards, as we'd expect, so that's going to be the 10-second dot again. They reduced the cost as well, and then Blazing Spear. This morph now increases the damage done of the entire ability by 30%. Okay, sounds all right. Wardens, Impaling Shards, reduce the duration to 10 seconds with 1 second ticks, reduce the cost. And Gripping Shards, reduce the cost even further down to 29.70. Okay. And here's an interesting change, which I think this will be a big help, honestly, for Wardens. Arctic Blast, they increase the duration to 20 seconds. They increase the damage per tick by 9%. And this morph now stuns once upon cast, rather than based on the number of ticks you're on for more active and deliberate gameplay. So this is a good change in the right direction for Wardens. They've been asking for a class stun, a reliable class stun for quite a while. Arctic Blast definitely was not that. Whether it needed to land like 3 times or 5 times, I don't even remember what they changed it to. Being able to do this immediately on cast, I think it's a good change. But obviously, there's so much more going on with the Warden right now. Specifically, those changes to like Deep Fissure and Subterranean Assault. Warden's losing a ton of passive damage from the Animal Companion skill line. Yeah, this is a change in the right direction, but much more is needed to sort of balance Wardens out for this patch. But that covers the class changes. Let's go quickly over the weapon changes, which are going to be very similar. Volley, they reduce the tick frequency and the duration, 10 seconds, 1 second. They reduce the cost. Endless Hail is going to be 15 seconds now compared to live. I think it's 14 seconds, so it's going to be a little bit easier for those longer rotations. Destruction Staff and Wall of Elements, very similar, 10 seconds and 1 second at base. They're reducing the cost here as well. But there's actually some nerfs here, so let's talk about this for a minute. Wall of Fire and its morphs now deal 10% increased damage against burning enemies down from 20%. So that's a significant cut in the effectiveness of running that Fire Staff on the back bar. I mean, it'll still be good, obviously, but you will see less damage from that skill and using that staff type specifically. But here's a big one that I want to make sure you know about. Unstable Wall. This is the skill that when you recast it, it does the explosion. They actually decrease the damage of the explosion by 33%. So that's a fairly big nerf for AoE builds. Unstable Wall has always been a great skill for like clearing out trash because you can cast it over and over again very quickly and deal plenty of those explosions. Now, I wouldn't say it's completely gutted because if you make your build right and you pump out crit damage and stuff like that, the explosions will still be pretty large, but definitely not as large as in the past. So keep that in mind if you're using Unstable Wall for AoE damage. That's going to be doing less damage next patch. Restoration Staff Grand Healing now takes every 1 second rather than every 2 seconds, so healers should be happy about that one. And then Carve, they increase the damage per tick by 33%, so that's good. And then Stampede, that's going to be another 15-second dot with 1 second ticks and a slight damage reduction there, 5%. Moving on to guild skills here. Ring of Preservation from the Fighters Guild. This now takes every 1 second rather than every 2 seconds. And then Necrotic Orb. This ability and the Mystic Orb morph now last 10 seconds rather than 20. It's going to tick for damage every 1 second as well. They reduce the cost also, and they increase the movement speed. So that's good. I think Orb is going to be very viable again for most builds as a backbar dot. And then finally, Caltrops. Return the duration of this ability and its morphs to 10 seconds and 1 second ticks. They reduce the cost to $22.95. And then Anti-Cavalry Caltrops. If you use that morph, that'll be 15 seconds total, which is down from the 20-second total in Week 1 PTS. Now, that's about it. There are a few other changes to like item sets, specifically Merciless Charge. This is just like a balance to fix the new duration for Stampede. So it's going to tick once per second over 7 seconds. They also reduced the damage, though, by 39%. So I don't know. This is going to be tough to backbar. I think, Maelstrom Staff is really ideal for a backbar weapon now with update 35 because you need that extra light and heavy attack damage with the nerfs that we got in week 1. Under PvP sets, Nocturnal's Ploy, they updated the tooltip to better describe its requirements. So it's not able to trigger off delayed or ticking events. Okay? And then Plague Break fixed an issue where it was proccing off some direct damage abilities and reinstated the 100 millisecond cooldown to prevent it from proccing multiple times per attack and becoming too powerful again. So some PvP balance there in the works as well. But overall, a fairly short patch, I would think, for week 3. I think they did allude to the fact that this is still in progress. There's so much that they did with week 1 that it's going to take them a while to update all of those. There's nothing here about light and heavy attacks, which I do hope they balance at least one more time before this patch goes live. Specifically, heavy attacks need better scaling and better multipliers so that they do more damage for heavy attack builds. Those still remain gutted, and there's nothing here on the week 3 notes for those. Also, nothing about Oaken Soul Ring, which is a little bit surprising. I'm still hopeful that there might be some tweaks left for that one coming next week or in week 5. We'll have to wait and see about that. But yeah, overall, pretty short patch. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Make sure you leave your feedback. If you can, make sure to log on PTS, post your feedback on the PTS forums. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you around in the next video.